everyone, Miranda and Tom here with Tom Marks.
Hello.
Hello. We just went to Valve, and we're back with information on Artifact, the card game that no one wanted to know about because it's not Half-Life 3. So we got a lot of insight into why that may not be the game that we're working on, or could be. We don't really know, but at least we know more about Valve's philosophy on making games. And we want to share that with you guys because we've had this overwhelming response to our coverage about, like, this isn't Half-Life 3, so who cares, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's fair, but I think, like, I understand. Half-Life 3, where is it? Sure. But at the same time, I think it's really interesting hearing more about Valve's approach to developing games.
Yeah, so they talked a lot. We sat down with a presentation presented by Gabe Newell kind of about the company, and they talked a lot about how basically they just make the games that they want to make, right? Like they don't, there's also this whole thing about, like, oh, they're cashing in on the card game market, trying to compete and just trying to make money. And, like, that's a really easy kind of, like, presumption to have kind of outwardly looking at this situation. But they were like, we don't look at budget reports, we don't look at projections about what Artifact is going to make, right? They just look at, like, what games do they want to make, what games do they want to solve, and then they have a very flat infrastructure where they say, if you want to work on this game, come join the team and work on this game. And people within Valve wanted to be working on this card game at the time, so it's what they're making right now.
Right, and that kind of decision-making thing for Valve and, like, how that works with their projects is very evident in Dota 2. So, like, the example I always bring up are pets. There are these pets. There's this cute little armadillo that would follow you around, and then one other character has a puppy, and that's it. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna do pets. They didn't do pets. I think it's because they just didn't feel like this was a project they really wanted to work on after they launched it. And so I don't know if we'll ever see that come back again. Kind of like Half-Life, right? And that's the biggest thing too is to note here is that they said very clearly they are making video games. They are making more video games than Artifact, and Valve is back in this. Yeah,
they took a long break. They said the long break was basically to focus on Steam OS and Vive and VR sort of stuff,
just
hardware stuff. And now they've kind of wrapped that up. Not that they're done with it, but now they can do that while making games. And I think we had this long 5-year drought where they hadn't made any games, and I think it's not out of the question, I think, for us to get a lot more Valve games. Like, I think if we got a Valve game a year or every other year from now on, I wouldn't be surprised.
So the interesting thing was that Gabe brought up specifically Nintendo, and compared to how Miyamoto can, like, be designing a Zelda or Mario game and say, okay, I want this function, so you need to make this hardware for me. And essentially, Gabe just wanted them to be able to do that, and now they have all these engineers and people that can work on hardware in function with the games that they want to make, and so they're not limited by that anymore. And maybe that's just kind of where they wanted to be, and now that they're there, new games.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of evidence that Half-Life 3 had been developed, that it had been being made at some point, or Episode 3 at least, something more Half-Life that we ended up not getting. I think probably the reason it died wasn't like, yo, they're making money off Steam, they don't need to make games anymore. I think it was probably that, like, people weren't passionate about the project for whatever internal reason, and it just sort of, the people moved to other teams. Like, that's the vibe I was getting.
Right, and that's kind of where I related to Pixar's Incredibles, right? Like, they didn't want to make that until they had the right story. So maybe that's just what we're having with Half-Life 3.
I think I actually left a little more hopeful. I think that we probably will see it eventually. It's just absolutely impossible to tell when that eventually would be.
Well, the good news is that their newest game seems like it's going to be really cool. So please check out our coverage on Artifact on IGN.com. And thank you for tuning in. See you next time.